Would you consider yourself a high-level entrepreneur? Now, most likely, if you're listening to this, you definitely are. And what I've heard over and over and over again is it's hard to find like-minded people that are like that too. Again, I'm from Maine, so I totally understand how difficult it can be. Thank goodness I have an amazing online community, so I know tons of them. And that is exactly why we are starting this brand new mastermind group with high-level, like-minded entrepreneurs, the ones that you can go alongside with that will help move you to the next level, let alone with kick butt coaching from me, because I like to slap you around, both on focus and on strategy. So if you're looking to double or triple this year, which I know most of you are, I want you to go ahead and apply and see if it's a good fit for you. I will totally tell you if it's not and if I wouldn't do it if I were you. But go to eventualmillionaire.com/apply. We are looking for amazing, like-minded entrepreneurs. My previous mastermind members have told me it is life changing. So take the time today, fill out the very quick application, and we'll see if it's a fit. Take care.
Potent advice and inspiration from real self-made millionaires. Welcome to the Eventual Millionaire with your host, Jamie Masters.
Welcome to Eventual Millionaire. I'm Jamie Masters, and today on the show we have John Livesay. You can check him out at johnlivesay.com. He also has an amazing new book called Better Selling Through Storytelling, and he is the pitch whisperer, and he's helped me. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jamie. I'm glad to be with you and your listeners.
Well, and I love the concept for the book, right? Because I used to think sales was skeezy beforehand. And I realized, especially with used car salesmen, it's because they're trying to sell you something you don't like, but telling stories feels natural. So give me some of the premise of the book.
Well, the base premise is the old way of selling, as you were mentioning, is to push a bunch of information out. Push, push, push. And it just doesn't work anymore. And the new way of selling is to pull people in with good stories. And the secret to this, Jamie, is when people see themselves in the story, that's the kind of journey they want to go on. And instead of having to push a bunch of information out, you pull people in, you become magnetic, and that's the new way to get people to want to hire you or buy what you're selling.
Which I adore. I feel like I'm pretty good at telling stories, but how can we get better at telling stories to sell, right? Because is there a special type of story? Because I don't want to be like, so the other day my sister was telling, right?
Yes. It's very important that you tell a couple of different stories. One is the story of origin, because people have to trust you first. It's a gut thing. Then they have to like you, which is a heart thing. And then in their head, they're thinking to themselves, will this work for me? So that's where the storytelling really takes over, is if you're painting a picture of another person you helped that was just like me, and I can see myself in that story, then I want to go on that journey with you. So the story of origin, there's 3 steps to selling. You have to sell yourself first, then you sell your company and what your company stands for, and then you sell the product or service. And most people make the mistake of selling the product or service without the other 2 first. So each one of those different levels requires a different story. So you sell yourself by telling your own story of origin. Here's how I became so passionate about helping business owners in your particular case.
That's a really cool distinction that I haven't really heard before. Because normally it's like, oh, this is our origin story, quote unquote, but it's usually about the company or the existence. Even though when I go on podcasts, I talk about me. I went to college here, right? I have a degree in this. And that connects people a lot better. Does it have to go in order like that? So self first for sure, and then company. So can you walk me through? Are they separate stories for each one?
Yes, typically, even if it's your own company and not working for a big company.
Yeah.
But, if you're an entrepreneur and have your own business, you want to tell that story of origin. I was struggling with this problem and I realized there's got to be a better way. So I created this company, and my company stands for integrity and kindness. And this is our ideal client that we like to work with. And then you get into what the story is of someone you helped, but you tell your own story first of, I first started my business because I was passionate about this. And I wanted to solve this problem for myself. And then I realized there's a lot of other people like me that had the same challenge. And then you go on from there. Because remember, there's a whole level of people have to trust you and like you and know you before they're going to buy from you. And what stories are so great at doing is making it an emotional connection. And when you tell a story that pulls people in and they have some emotional drama to it, and we can go into what makes a good story if you'd like, then people really resonate with it, and it makes you memorable, and it also gets you out of the price commodity mindset. Because, if you're pitching and they're looking at you versus two other alternative solutions, then it's all about, well, who has the best price. But if you've separated yourself with a good story, they're going to remember you better, and they're going to want to pay that price because you've told a story that makes them feel like, I got to have that.
See, I love the addition to those, though, because I knew the know, like, and trust thing is really important. I just wanted people to like me, right, and trust me. So I'd get that piece, but the whole company and the product and showing before and afters and stuff is huge. So yes, I want to know what makes a good story. But before that, when do we use the stories?
I find that you're using the stories throughout the whole sales process. I mean, the basic sales process is rapport building, needs analysis, presenting, overcoming objections, and closing. And the story, if you put stories into each of those stages, instead of waiting till the end or waiting for the presentation, the rapport building is the story of origin.
Great.
And then you tell a story of, I love to work with my clients. Let me tell you the story of someone I asked a few questions for, and we uncovered some unhidden needs. Or, we tell the story. Imagine if we waved a magic wand over your business a year from now, what would it look like? That's storytelling. And then the case studies, which can be so dry and boring. We worked with this company. Here's a before and after picture of what we did for them of redesigning their office or something. But if you tell a story of how hard it was to remodel an airport, for example, one of my architecture clients, I helped them with this. And you have a little bit of drama in there. And then people say, oh, that's what we want. We want people that, can handle any unexpected problems that might come up. And then, of course, the closing, once you tell a story and people see themselves in that story, the closing question becomes, does that sound like the kind of journey you'd like to go on? So again, it's storytelling.
That's smooth. Oh yeah, that's really smooth. I really like that. So it's not like you're trying to front load, hey, like and trust me, here are my stories, my origin, right? You're right. Actually weaving them into all the separate pieces.
And I want to make a flip a little bit, because that know, like, and trust, which is the standard thing that so many people have, I'm a big believer that order is reversed. So the big takeaway for people is, if you know me and I tell you everything there is about my product and I give you a bunch of information, then you'll like me and then you'll trust me. The order is completely wrong. We need to start at the bottom of our gut. The trust has to happen first. Handshake was to show you didn't have a weapon in your hand.
Right? Yes.
So social proof, the trust, eye contact, credibility, referrals, that's where the trust starts. And then it goes from the gut to the heart. Do I like you? And then, and only then, am I willing to listen to what you have to say, where I can say, do I see myself in the story that it could work for me? Because if you tell the story of somebody else and they can't see themselves in the story, they're still not going to buy. So let's get people to say they have to trust, like, and know you. Get that order, which is the flip side of that. The old way is know me first, and then you'll like me, and then you'll trust me. Start from the other opposite way.
I have not heard that before either. I really like that. Especially maybe trust, like, and know didn't sound as sexy as know, like, and trust. I don't know. It's just stuck in my head like that.
But gut, heart, and head will stick in your head.
Oh, I love this. Okay, so then what does make a really good story? Because it's one thing, like you said, to just sort of talk about an airport remodel, and it's a total other thing to make it actually interesting to listen to.
So a good story has 4 elements to it. The first one is exposition, where you paint the picture of who, what, where, when. Then there's a problem to solve, and usually some kind of obstacle, and a solution. And the secret sauce is the 4th level of resolution. What is life like after this problem has been solved? And remember that the person in the story that's the hero is your client, not you. You're Yoda in Star Wars. You're the Sherpa helping your client climb Mount Everest. And that's what makes people love a good story. So the story is not you as the hero.
Yeah, we have a tendency to say I, even during sales conversations. And I've heard, like, asking questions makes a huge difference and sort of puts it on them in the sales process. But I love this idea of the picture, setting the picture. So how do we break that down? Like, give us a way to have one idea, one story to start from finish.
The story I talk about is helping people with their confidence, because everybody gets nervous when you have to pitch to get hired, pitch to get a new client, whatever it is. And I have people stack their moments of certainty when they work with me, when they write down 2 or 3 times when they knew they nailed it and have that in their head as opposed to the negative self-talk. And one of my clients, Martin, told me, that really helped me because I remember that I was born in South America, he said, but I grew up in the Netherlands. And when I turned 18, my parents took me back to South America and dropped me off naked in the Amazon jungle to survive for 2 weeks because in my culture, that's a rite of passage into manhood. I said, Martin, that story gave me goosebumps. Let's work on that. I said, what did you learn in the jungle? He goes, well, I learned how to focus and pivot and persevere. I said, great. We're going to take those lessons from the Amazon jungle to the concrete jungle of being an entrepreneur. And when he had that pitch practiced, he got his startup funded because the investor said, we're going to put our money in the guy that survived the Amazon jungle. He'll figure out anything else.
Right. Naked Amazon jungle. Yeah, you can totally figure this piece out. Yeah.
So if we go back to the structure of a good story, you can see now, Jamie, where all that is. The exposition, he's 18 years old, and I said, Martin, if you don't say that that's a rite of passage in your culture, it sounds like child abuse.
It's crazy. Yeah.
So you need to paint that picture. The problem is clearly he's naked there for 2 weeks. The solution is he learns those life lessons, pivot, persevere, and focus. And then the resolution is he gets his startup funded by telling that story. And so now you see why that story works so well.
Okay. So, and who is his avatar then? Because I know they want to see themselves in that picture. So we're trying to build the stories based on what journey that they want to go through, right? So do you pick your avatar first?
Well, in this particular case, Martin was selling himself to the investors.
That makes sense.
And so that's an example of selling yourself via a story of yourself.
Like origin-ish. Okay.
Yes, exactly. Because instead of just getting up and going, I'm somebody who's very perseverant and doesn't give up, you tell that story. It's much more memorable.
Yeah. Like, I don't know, like, or trust you at this moment because, who says? Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So how do we, so everybody's told testimonials are amazing, case studies are so good, right? So people know that logically right now, and they probably even have some. How do we take one of those and massage it into an actually interesting thing using these 4 pieces?
Yes. So I'll go back to the example of when I worked with an architecture firm that was one of 2 other firms. So there was a total of 3 of them they were each pitching for 1 hour, back to back to back. And the airport decision makers said, we're going to hire the people we like the most because it's a 5-year project.
Wow.
And not who has the best designs. And so that's when they really pulled me in. They said, we need John in here.
They're like, no pressure. Someone has to like me like this. Awesome. Great.
Yeah, we need empathy skills, confidence skills, and all that stuff. So when it came to the case study, they had pictures of before. Here's an airport before we modeled. Here's an airport after. There was nothing, and it obviously looked better, but everyone was doing that. So I said, let's start with the story of 3 years ago. Paint that picture, right? We did this is what we did for JFK, for JetBlue. And one of the goals was not to interrupt the revenue coming into the retail stores during the remodel. So in the middle of the night, we had to rip up all the floors and re-cable everything. And in the 2 a.m, there was a problem. But we had all of our vendors on standby that we could call and come immediately to solve that problem. And right before the stores opened at 7 a.m., the last tile went down at 6:59, and not a penny was lost.
I got goosebumps from that silly airport story. Like,
yes.
I mean, not silly, but you know what I mean. Wow.
Right.
No.
Yes. So that is how you take a boring old case study and tell a story that makes people want to hire you.
I love this. How do we get better at telling this? So if you're not already, like, you're a really good storyteller. So of course I got goosebumps, right? That's sort of what you do. For somebody that doesn't feel like they're great and they're just sort of putting the chunks that you say in a certain way. And of course they'll get your book and they'll get all the details on how to do it. But when we look at that, how do they get better and more well practiced at knowing like what actually gives goosebumps and what doesn't when they keep testing it?
That's it. What you said it right there. Test it. Practice it. The key to success, Arthur Ashe, the famous tennis pro, said, is confidence, and the key to confidence is preparation. So before you go in to prepare and pitch for this big multi-million-dollar deal, practice your stories, test it out, see if you lose people at a particular place, see if they understand, see if it gives people goosebumps. And that all is by creating that drama and painting the picture of those details.
See, I remember we were talking about the pitching stuff because you were helping me with that. And I remember going, when I first started Eventual Millionaire, I kept saying, I'm a business coach, I'm a blah, 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 and people's eyes sort of glaze over, right? And then I'd say, I interview millionaires, and then stop dead. And people would go, wait, what? Right? And
Mhm.
so, but it took a ton of testing of boring faces for a really long time, just for one little hook. So how
Yes.
long does it take to test? I know we worked on our stuff, and I have it up here because I haven't tested it that much and I can't
hmm
remember it. Right? So how
hmm
do we remember it and keep testing it? And how long does it take to actually know if it's good?
I would say you can test it within 5 to 10 people, an elevator pitch in particular,
Mhm.
and you'll get, if the eyebrows go up and they get intrigued enough, and the secret sauce is, oh, that's interesting, Jamie. Tell me more. You know you've got something.
I love that. So it doesn't seem like it's forever. Because that's the other thing. I feel like we refine and refine and refine because it's still not quote unquote good enough no matter what, right? That's always feeling like you
It's a
should
work in
improve.
progress, right?
Yeah.
But you want to intrigue somebody with something like you should. If someone says to me, "What do you do, John?" I said, "Well, you know how everybody needs a good elevator pitch, and few people have one. I'm known as the pitch whisperer, and I help people go from invisible to irresistible. And when that happens, their business takes off. That's short and sweet, but it's got enough in there that people say, wait a minute, what's a pitch whisperer? I know what a horse whisperer is." Or they say, oh, how can you get me to go from invisible to irresistible? So there's enough in there that intrigues people to say, tell me more about that. And then I have a whole set of answers ready to go if they ask about what's a pitch whisperer or how do I get to be invisible.
Because
To
they
irresistible.
will pick up the piece that they actually think is interesting, and then you can just elaborate on that instead of having to tell them one thing.
Yes. So an elevator pitch is not an invitation for a 10-minute monologue. It's an
We need to
invitation.
tell everybody that right now. I'm just saying, yes.
Yes, it's an invitation to intrigue them enough to say, tell me more. And then, for example, I'll say, well, much like a horse whisperer, I help people with their confidence and calm them down. And then I make sure they have answers to the 3 unspoken questions that everybody has when they hear you pitch anything. And I stop. And that creates an open loop, which is, oh my God, what are those 3 unspoken questions? And we've already covered them. Do I trust you? Do I like you? And will this work for me?
See, I love that. It's the art of silence in sales or in anything, especially conversation wise, is huge. And I feel like it is not used nearly enough from all humans. So how have you gotten good at that? And how can we get good at shutting up
Yes.
once in a while? I had to learn when I started this podcast that I need to be quiet more. It was tough.
Well, the old way of selling, again, is to ask a closing question. Do you want to buy this house if you're a real estate agent? And then you wait for the person to say yes or no. And the old way was whoever spoke first lost.
Yep.
And that just doesn't work. First of all, the negative self-talk in your head. Oh my God, if I have to show this person another house, I'm going to lose my mind. I really need this commission. You say something like, oh, well, if I throw the refrigerator in, would you buy it then? So here's the secret to getting comfortable with the silence in the room is to get comfortable with the silence in your head, to quiet those thoughts down. And once you quiet the thoughts in your head down, you become comfortable with the silence in the room. And I tell people to just say this to themselves 3 times. I'm patient and calm after I've asked you if you want to buy the house or hire me or whatever it is. And that extra 3 to 5 seconds, it allows real estate agents to increase their sales closings by 40%. Because people can pick up that energy. I'm patient and calm. You're not trying to get them to say yes or no. I'm waiting for you to say yes or no or have a question or whatever it is. You're holding the space.
Because the anxiety, so I've been with way too many salespeople that are not good, where you're like, oh, now you feel needy and I was going to say something and buy and now I don't want to, right? Like this is icky. Now I'm going to run the other way. And
Right.
and it's funny because salespeople don't even realize that they're doing it sometimes, but the silence has a weight of energy in it. So is that enough, especially for an entrepreneur that does have a crazy brain that's active all the time? Is saying I'm patient and calm enough to change the whole energy in the room?
Well, it surprisingly does work, yes. And of course, then if you want to get more comfortable with the silence in your head, meditate, do power of now, all that kind of stuff. That's why it's so popular in Silicon Valley, is this mindfulness training, because they know that it gives them more ideas and more productivity, more patience with their employers, not to panic. This concept of not panicking and staying calm is what I base my whole TEDx talk on, which is be the lifeguard of your own life. And I learned that when somebody was drowning and my training came up, I couldn't panic because that person was panicking already in the water. And that has served me my whole career. And the more you can rely on that ability to not panic, when in my case, when I was laid off after working for Condé Nast for 15 years, and I didn't panic, and I said, well, wouldn't you, I'd have to be out in 24 hours, but don't you want a status report turnover of where all the ads should be. And they're like, well, that'd be great, but everyone else is so angry, they're just storming out. The frontal cortex had taken over. But I had that training from my lifeguard days to not panic during a problem or an emergency or a crisis and stay calm. And then that's what allowed me to get hired back 2 years later and win Salesperson of the Year because of how I left on that good note.
Wow, I didn't know that story. That's awesome. So, and that when I talk to entrepreneurs in general, or we talk about meditation on this, a lot of the times it's like, I know it's good, but it's not. But me, and they have all these things, right? So, can you tell me a little bit maybe about your personal journey and how you've been able to calm the panic in general? Just because I feel like the more stories we hear from some of that, the better, because it's like chipping away at this self-protection of no, I can't do it ourselves.
I think, when I got that news, which is, even though you thought it might happen, and back in 2008, the economy was down and they were laying off all the people in the outside offices of New York, you still have a sense. And I think part of it is just remembering that you might lose your job, but not your identity. And that's so hard for entrepreneurs in general, because, if it's our vision and our idea, and even if you're working for somebody else, I am this person that has this position and this title for so many years. And who am I without all that? So you can be scared, you can be sad, but when you remember who you are is bigger than what you're doing, it allows you to not panic.
That's really interesting. Self-identity is a massive thing, and we attach ourselves to so many. I remember when I quit my six-figure job, I was like, but I was the young person that made lots of money, and now I'm a stay-at-home mom. It was so one of those moments of like, oh no, my identity had fueled me for so long. How do you keep that though? How do you keep parts of your identity when you feel like you were so attached and it's gone? I know I'm asking you non-book questions in any way, but
it's all actually a lot of that's in the book too.
Great.
Because it's really remembering that when we get off what I call the self-esteem roller coaster, and I was on it myself, it's miserable. I only feel good about myself if my numbers are up, and I feel bad about myself if my numbers are down. Or I feel good about myself if I'm winning a sales award, and I feel bad about myself if I'm being laid off. I feel good about myself as an entrepreneur if I get funding, and I feel bad about myself if I'm not. On and on and on. And the way off of that self-esteem roller coaster is to remember, because when I was winning that award 2 years after being laid off, I said, wait a minute, I'm the same person. And when we remember that who we are is bigger than any one thing happening to us at any one moment, that's what gives us the strength to not panic and stay calm.
How do you do that in the moment? Can you tell a little bit more about the lifeguard training and stuff like that from your TED Talk? And we'll link up to the TED Talk and stuff like that, because during that moment, like you said, prefrontal cortex typically just shuts off. And we are wired in a horrible way sometimes, whether it be fighting with your spouse or fighting with employees or whatever it is. We kind of go, ugh. So how do we work on that?
Well, a lot of it has to do with training and preparation. Because whether you're training to be a lifeguard or in the military, that's, you can't rely on your, emotions you need your training to take over. So the more prepared you are to go, remember, oh, wait a minute, I need to stay calm. Doesn't do anybody any good if we both panic. That's really part of it. And again, it's an awareness that who you are is not determined by whether you get a yes or no, or whether you're defined by all that. And I think that's really, listing down some characteristics about things you really pride yourself on that are not outside related. In other words, what are you proud of? Well, I'm proud of this accomplishment and that accomplishment. No. Well, I'm a good friend. I'm a good son. I'm a good whatever. No. That's relational. That's all outside focused. What are the characteristics of you? Well, I'm creative. I'm resilient. I have focus. That's your identity. That
makes so much sense. Is it situational? So when we talk about somebody that's pitching or something like that, does it have to be situationally practiced, or can it move from thing to thing? I'm just thinking about if somebody's being pitched versus speaking on stage versus talking to your kids versus, right? Is it situational based as far as the training goes, or can you be like, I just get good at it? I just get good at it. The old analogy is if you squeeze an orange, you get orange juice. Doesn't matter what time of day, it's always orange juice. Doesn't matter if you're squeezing it in the corner
But what happens to us when we get squeezed into the corner? Do we still get kindness and love and calm, rational thought? And so when we remember that we're just like that orange, no matter what's happening to us at any one moment, that so whether I'm giving a TEDx talk or speaking in front of a sales organization of 500, 600 or more people, or having a one-on-one conversation to get hired to give that talk, I'm the same person. And that authenticity is what people are buying.
And I love this. It makes me go, oh, now I can train my children to learn some of these things now, and it will be widely accepted in all the different aspects of their life. Because it is, I feel like sometimes in business, we're so narrow focused on business is like this, and we have to do it like this, and it's so different than everywhere else in your life. It seems so segmented, and that's why it's an amazing thing that you can sort of pull this into all areas of your life.
Well, that's why social media is such a great business tool. Because when you share your vulnerabilities, your struggle, your challenges, you're telling a story that pulls people in and they get to trust and like and know you.
See, okay. So what I actually just went, I should just take that exposition, problem, solution, resolution, and do that on all my social posts.
Yes.
Right?
And you can create open loops and say, next week, I'm going to tell you how I overcame that problem.
I love
and then you
this.
give the solution. Next week, I'm going to tell you what life is like for my client after working with me for a year.
Wow. Ooh, that's annoying. I love it. So what if you suck at writing? Because I have never said that I'm the best writer in the world. I'm okay at storytelling. I love talking and storytelling but as far as writing it down, not so great.
Well, take what you say, send it to rev.com, have them transcribe it, and edit it and post it.
Do you feel like there's a different tone that needs to be used in any aspect, or do you feel like it's one and the same no matter what?
Well, I really worked hard to make my book feel like you were listening to me talk.
That's funny that you're trying to make it feel like that instead of the opposite.
Yes, I don't want it to be some intellectual, educational. I want you to feel like you're listening to a conversation. And I narrated my own book for that very reason on Audible, so that people feel like, oh, John's sharing some stories with me, and I can learn something and I can apply it and be inspired and maybe even entertained and all the things that you want when you're engaging with anybody.
Because you really feel like you can connect to that. I mean, I remember when I wrote my book, I remember trying to make it less conversational because I would audio it and I would go, okay, this is what I got, people, help me, right? So to me, I was trying to make it be more structured and thought out and that sort of stuff, where in reality, I feel like it didn't actually sound totally like me because it wasn't me, which is not necessarily good.
Well, you want your voice. Your brand must have your voice in every format. And
that makes it way easier. Maybe I do want to write another book. Okay. Yeah. Because then I can, right?
Yes.
So when we're looking at, I love what you're saying before about the self-esteem roller coaster, right? For salespeople, especially for entrepreneurs that live and die by the sword, right? Sales call. Oh no, now I feel crappy. And I have my clients batch sales calls to be in the same overarching mood throughout, you know what I mean? Because once you're in that space, it feels easier to be in that space. But either no's or getting negative feedback or something like that can trigger them. Do you have any helpful tips on some of this? Because I know you help a lot of salespeople.
I do. I put faces on it because, for example, my own fears of starting my own podcast. And I was like, when someone suggested me doing that, I said, why don't I go to the moon? That seemed overwhelming. And I thought, well, let me put some faces on it. The first face that we all face is this face of rejection. And being in sales long enough, my solution to that is never reject yourself. And we tend to do that. When I was selling ads for Condé Nast and someone said, oh, we're going with another company, I'd be like, oh, maybe another salesperson could have gotten a yes, or maybe they're right. Maybe that other company's bad. And you're like, you don't buy into that. Don't reject yourself or what you're selling just because they said no. And no now doesn't mean no forever. Then the second fear is the fear of failure. What if I, start my own podcast and nobody listens to it, right? Or what if I start this business and I'll be embarrassed or wasted time and money? And fear is just feedback. When you look at it as feedback instead of devastation, and you keep going till you get a zombie idea so great it won't die. And then the third face is this face of the unknown. And this almost stopped me from doing the podcast. What mic do I buy? How do I edit this thing? And I found a company, that's what their business is, done for you podcasting. I just do the interview and they take care of the rest. So the key to overcoming the fear of the unknown is don't go it alone. Collaborate with others.
That sounds genius. So your fear is feedback. It's easier said than done when you're in the moment of it, right? What are some tactics or help that you use to remember that when you actually need it? I know you're probably really good at this already, but for the people that are trying it and going,
No,
fear,
no.
fear, right?
Well, fear of failure in particular is, oh, that didn't work. And I get inspired by, reading biographies of people who created things. How many times did Edison have to, try to make the light bulb work, right? How many times did Howard Schultz get rejected trying to get Starbucks funded? And just realize that that's part of the journey that you're on, hence the story again. We're all on our own hero's journey. And there's going to be bumps and ups and downs along the journey. And you just go, oh, that's where I am at the moment. In fact, have you heard of the trough of despair that happens to a lot of entrepreneurs?
No, I would love to hear about that. The trough of despair. Okay.
Dun, dun, dun.
Right?
Sounds like something from Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
But if you Google it, you'll see it's an actual graph. Everyone gets all excited when their business starts up. And then they have disappointments. Sales don't go as fast. Funding doesn't happen as fast. The people they wanted to come work for them don't stay, whatever it is. And they go into this trough of despair. And it's part of almost every startup's journey. And when you realize you're in it, it's sometimes hard to see your way up out of it. But if you go, oh, this is where I am in the story, I'm in the trough of despair, it's up to me how long I stay down here, and realize it's going to get better if I do these steps and read other books of other people who've been in that situation, and not just assume that from looking from the outside in that everything was just one long straight line up. It'll help you.
That's perfect for the people that are listening right now going, crap, I'm totally in the trough of despair right now. Because it's the perspective thing that's hard. If you don't know that you're in it, then who knows how long it's going to last. And that's the thing that's so scary.
Exactly. And that others have been in it and gotten out of it. And that you too can do the same because you're not alone. Because that's what storytelling does. It tells other people's stories, inspire you to realize, oh, they were in this too.
I know we have to start wrapping up in just a second, but I want to ask you, do you feel like the stories should always be after the fact, right? So when I see a lot of thought leaders that are like, oh, and they're telling about the problems that they're going through right now, and they don't have a solution or a resolution yet. Does that feel, what do you think about that stuff?
So is the question, what do you do if you're in the middle of the story and you want to tell your story anyway?
Well, I'm just wondering for somebody that's a thought leader, and people need that know, like, and trust in order for them to actually agree with them. When they go through what they're going through right now to share their journey, is that good storytelling, or is that bad because there is no resolution and no solution? They're not like they just get scared that they might not make it out of there, right? Because they're telling it as it comes up.
I would say definitely have your story prepared, and don't like, even if you're going to get on stage, you don't sort of just share, oh, I'm really sad and depressed right now and I don't have any outcome or takeaways to help you. I just want to share this is where I am. It's not a therapy session. And storytelling is not a therapy session either. So if you're going to tell your story and you don't know where it's going to end, then don't tell that story till you have all four parts.
See, I really appreciate that. I just see a lot of social media. And in social, it's like, and everything sucks. Moral of the story, you're in it. Or something like that. And you're like, I don't know that you ever feel better. So it doesn't feel like you want to be a part of that journey or that story, because it doesn't feel like it has a resolution. So every story should really have the solution and resolution at the end.
Exactly.
Here's a problem. Okay. Well, I appreciate that too. When we were looking at, to me, when I look at different marketing, different storytelling, sometimes I am so riveted by the story, but let down at the end when I'm like, it's a movie that has no happy ending, and it makes me feel worse rather than better.
Right. Exactly. Okay. Yes. And the same thing with, what's life like working with me for my clients? And do you want that same experience? Paint that picture. People buy transformation, not information. And the storytelling is what takes them on that journey of transformation. Here's life like before they worked with Jamie. Here's life after working with Jamie. Does that sound like the kind of journey you'd like to go on? Then Jamie is your person.
I love how
Jamie.
formulaic it is also. Like, does that sound like the journey? Who would say no to that? Of course. At the end, the resolution sounds perfect. Of course.
Hmm.
It's a natural yes, which doesn't feel like a skeezy used car salesman, which is what we started with at the top. So I want to ask
Exactly.
you the last question. What is one action, besides getting your book, one action listeners can take this week to help move them forward towards their goal of 1 million?
The number one action you can do is to craft your own story of origin and have a great elevator pitch ready to go so that you're prepared and confident and that it's clear, concise, and compelling.
I love it. So simple. Go pick up the book. Where do we find you online and get the book and all that?
I'm johnlivesay.com. If you can't remember that, you can Google the Pitch Whisper and all my content will come up that way. The book is on all the websites, Amazon, etc., that sell my book. It's on Audible. And if you want to get a sneak peek of my book for free, you can go on my website and put your email in and you get a free sneak peek of the book. And you can also get that if you text the word pitch to 66866, you can get a free sneak peek that way.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, John. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Jamie.
Thank you for listening and investing in yourself with your time. I so appreciate it. And if you enjoyed this episode, I would be forever grateful if you would be willing to leave a rating or review in whatever app you use for your podcast. I know that's what really bumps it up in the rankings. And I would so appreciate your time, especially if you've been a long-time listener. But of course, if you like this episode and you're brand new, thank you for being here too. Have an amazing, amazing day.